So hello, Itamar.
Hi, Shannon. Hi, everybody.
All right. So first of all, before we get started with this, there's a couple of things we got to get out about Itamar here. First of all, I would like to congratulate Itamar. He won the 2020 Letter One Rising Star Jazz Award last week, which is a big deal. So everyone's clapping for you, Itamar. We can't hear them because that would be very noisy. So I'd like to congratulate you on that. It's incredible, and I'm so proud of you. And also, on a personal note, Itamar got married just a couple days ago. So as we say, Mazel Tov. I can't tell you how happy I am for you, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So, all right. So now we're going to get to some questions, and so I'd like to tell everyone we'll finish the Q&A exactly in a half an hour. So that would be 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. So if you have any questions that you want to add, I have some questions from earlier that people had given me, who I gave a sneak peek to. Um, so if you have any questions, put them on the YouTube chat, and they will be communicated to me by a device in my ear that I use because I also work with the Secret Service. All right, so the first question is, actually here for you, Itamar. So you get to be our star. The first question is, what is your musical background, and how did you create your unique style of playing trumpet?
Hmm. Um, that's a great question. I so my musical background, I grew up in a musical family. My father is a musician, and my brother is a musician, and two of my uncles are musicians. So from both sides of the family, music was very prominent in my childhood. And I started off playing. My first instrument was violin, actually, when I was 3 years old, and then I played piano. I started around age 6, and that was very standard. I never reached a high level or on any of them. And and then I started playing electric guitar at about age, I don't remember how old I was. I think I was in third grade. And I played blues guitar. And I started on trumpet when I was about 11, 12. And I took lessons. I'm not, but my interest quite immediately was on blues and jazz. So I never had a formal classical training. I did study in conservatory for a short time, but I didn't really uh, went in the system of playing in the sort of the classical canon and playing in youth orchestras and so on and so forth. And we also don't really have the brass band tradition in Israel, so I was taking private lessons, and I was interested in jazz very early on. And so that's my formal training, is in that tradition. And I studied for a year in a very fine school in Israel called the Rimon School for Jazz and Contemporary Music. And then I moved to New York, and I studied at the New School. And there I continued on playing professionally and so on and so forth. Um, and then sort of next to that, I have my family's tradition of music. My father's family are from Bukhara, from the city of Balkh in Afghanistan, and the other half from Tashkent. So actually half from Uzbekistan and Tajikistan. So the Emirate of Bukhara, and moved to Jerusalem in the early 20th century, in the actually very beginning of the 20th century. And I grew up in a Sephardic synagogue, actually in a North African synagogue, so predominantly of the Libyan community. So I had a lot, and my father sort of, very specializes in these different kinds of music from the what we call the Near East. So that was always a very big part of just the music that I had more naturally around me, and that I participated in a folkloric way, but not in a professional way. And then, you know, as I got older, I got more interested in letting that music come into my playing, also in a professional way. So, you know, I went into a very deep dive playing makams on the trumpet. I had the fortune to design this trumpet that I'm playing on that plays quarter tones. So it enables me to play makams. And that's sort of, that's my long-winded answer to say that kind of what brought me to my style of playing is sort of combining all the elements um, that I want to in my playing. In other words, I don't really filter. I really love music. I always loved music. Even as a kid, we used to listen to a lot of different types of music, and I think that's very, you know, I'm very fortunate to have parents who really love music and different kinds of music. So I never really had the, okay, we like this and we don't like that. We always had a mixture of many things. You know, we had the all turntable at our house, and we had Prince record, and then, you know, maybe a classical record, the Edith Piaf, Weather Report, um, whatever was good. Nusrat Fatah Ali Khan used to play a lot in our house. So, you know, as Duke Ellington said, there's only two types of music, good and bad. So, so once you kind of open the floodgates to your subconscious, they said whatever I like goes, you know, is allowed to go in. I don't hold anything back. That's kind of, I think, what brought to my specific style of playing.
Wow, thank you. Well, I love hearing about your background because I find it very inspiring since growing up in the United States, you know, in the 1970s, 80s, into the 90s, you know, as a kid, like, you know, I didn't get exposed to all those kinds of things in quite the same way. But I actually, the next question is actually for me, so I might hit on it a little bit. Next question is for me, what are some of the musical influences which inspired the language of this piece? Right. Okay, so first of all, this piece is obviously inspired by me hearing Itamar perform. So as I said at the beginning, you know, 5 years ago when I heard his ensemble playing in Montreal, I locked into a sound that was familiar and yet totally unique. And what was familiar is obviously Itamar plays, you know, some more straight ahead jazz type music as well. It's not all sort of Middle Eastern type music. But what was familiar was like the language that we kind of both grew up of popular music. And especially I heard a lot of like almost the minimalistic influence on pop music, like bands like Radiohead, you know, like just this idea of musicians taking sort of popular music, but stretching it out and having these really emotional chord changes. And when I heard Itamar's music, I just said, wow, because that's something I do both in my popular music and in my classical music. And of course, the more Middle Eastern, or for me, like that, the traditional Jewish music was something I grew up hearing and singing. And so that it tapped into something. So for this piece, there's basically kind of three influences, because each movement for me really had a different feeling, although each movement's meant to go together. I mean, it's really meant to be one long meditation. The first movement is, you know, because it's about all you shining stars, it's about, you know, sort of the divine and stillness and being really comfortable or maybe uncomfortable in the stillness. So I look to a lot of what were called the holy minimalists, people like Arvo Pärt and Goretzky, composers like that, who just, they're okay just having long stretched out sections without big cadences, without big moments necessarily. So I was very influenced by those composers, especially for the first movement. The second movement, Arrows, is really like an homage for me to the Jewish liturgical and folk music I grew up with. Even though it doesn't really sound exactly like it, it's like the soul of it's in there. And Itamar and I spoke at length when we were preparing this piece, because it's one thing to take, let's say, like a Jewish folk melody and to arrange it kind of in a modern style. It's another thing to sort of create a whole new language. And what I tried to do was create a whole new language, both for the strings and then for Itamar to improvise off of. And the third piece, Woven, literally I wanted to sound like they were melodic lines that were weaving in and out. And I have always been obsessed, especially when I went to my conservatory years ago, with Renaissance vocal music. Something about Renaissance, medieval and Renaissance vocal music, but especially Renaissance, how it's almost like these vocal lines are perfectly woven together. And even though the idea of woven comes from the psalm text, I also used it kind of musically. So if in that movement, there's these lines just kind of weaving in and out, and then you have Itamar playing on top, improvising on top as well, and it just creates a lot of texture. So that's my very long-winded answer. Let's see, let's get to a question that's on the chat. Let's see. So Itamar, this one's good for you. I guess you kind of said it, but it could be more specific. Who inspires you? And I guess it doesn't say specifically, so I guess anybody.
Well, that of course changes over time. I have to say that this piece inspired me a lot, and working with you, Shannon. Really, I feel like it's really opened up a world of music for me that I really feel in a very deep way. So that has definitely been a very inspiring experience for me. I'm inspired by concepts. It's an interesting thing to say, but I just, as maybe a lot of people might know, that we just lost a really great musician, Chick Corea. And I just read something online. It became quite famous, but Chick Corea at some point wrote this collection of notes that I think he titled something like Cheap Advice for Musicians or something. And it's a list of things that you can do or think about. And so many of them involved around the concept of space. And one of them is really beautiful. And he said, create space and then put something in it. And I think you've done that in a very, very masterful and beautiful way. There's so much space in the music. There's so much breath and so much imagination and atmosphere. And that's something that I think, that's something that really inspires me in music. And of course, I'll talk about people like Miles Davis. And I mentioned Prince. These are, you mentioned Radiohead. I think all of them have this element of space in them that is very, very beautiful, and protecting that space and loving the space. And it's interesting, and the way I think I frame it like that is because sometimes I love something so much, and then I find a musician or an artist or a person that does that. So for instance, you mentioned the minimalist composers, and I have to be honest, I can't honestly say that I've been inspired by many minimalist composers because I haven't been exposed to them until a much older age, until a point that that maybe my musical identity was pretty well formed, with the exception of Philip Glass that I was exposed to earlier on. But also I was, already in my teens when I heard Philip Glass for the first time, and I said, "Whoa, this is really cool." And at the same time, when I hear, a lot of his work, or, Arvo Pärt, I'm like, yes, this is exactly what I'm about in so many ways. And that's something that I heard when I heard your music for the first time. That's what I felt. I said, Yes, this is how, like I was saying, Shannon is writing the music that I want to hear. um, so I'm very I'm very inspired by space.
Well, thank you. And actually, even though that question was not directed towards either of us, I'm going to answer mine. Yours was too beautiful, so I feel like mine will just be real earthy. You know, inspiration for me comes from a lot of places, and it doesn't really come from music. Oddly enough, I feel, and I know there's a lot of musicians who are joining us today on YouTube. Musicians, like if you've grown up listening to music, analyzing music, making music, you know, playing music, it becomes language to you. And after you've been around a language for a certain amount of time, the language just almost becomes part of your DNA. So I hate to say it, but it's very rare I'll listen to something new and go, that's going to influence me. I mean, I may love it and be moved by it or find it interesting, but I feel like I've had such a deep well of music from my youth that I'm almost more inspired by other things. And I really find actually film has been a real source of inspiration, not directly that I'm writing music about a movie or something, but I really feel like the way that directors use visual images and sound and time and balance that, they do it in a way that then I can come to my music and interpret it through my notes, and it becomes something, I don't know, it's like it's almost becomes a new language. And so for me, that's a big a source of inspiration is actually film. And the other thing I was going to say is that, you know, one of the kind of musics I grew up with, which is totally unrelated to classical and any of this fancy intellectual stuff, is folk music. I grew up with a lot of American folk music, which I really experimented with a lot in my composing a little bit later on. And what I connect to about folk music is it's just people who are playing like raw emotions. There's nothing super intellectual about it. When I say folk, I mean like, you know, music that you might hear in the Appalachian Mountains or, you know, something like that. And so I've always been so connected to it, not necessarily just the music, but like the expression. I feel like I'm a composer who likes to focus on pathos. You know, I'm all about emotion and power. And you can hear that in this piece. There's a lot of moments where I can't hide it. I'm just a schmaltzy emotional guy. So I don't know. There's something about like just that raw energy that I connect to with folk music. All right, let's move on. There's a question here, and I suspect this might be for one of my students. By the way, for those of you watching, I am also a very proud New York City public school teacher, been teaching music for 14 years. So this person says, Mr. S. Stryker, probably a student, past student at least, what would you say is the biggest difference between conducting others' music as opposed to conducting your own? That's a great question. Most of my conducting experience has been conducting choral music. And for the musicians who played on this, who were watching, they were very patient with me. Choral conducting is quite different from orchestral conducting. So most of my conducting has not been my own music. It's been kind of either traditional choral music or things perhaps I've arranged. But and choral conducting for me is just it's all about breath and the voice. So that's why it's a lot of hand movement, open hands, you know. So when I'm conducting, I'm almost always conducting other people's music, and it's vocal music. So in this case, you were watching me conduct string musicians who would probably prefer a guy with a baton and a little bit more precision because they're not working the same way that the voice works. And so we had a fun time during rehearsal and recording because, you know, I did my best and I think it worked well. So to answer that question, the biggest difference between conducting my own music and other people's music is I am frightened to conduct my own music, because when I'm conducting someone else's music, they're not usually there watching me, judging me. So I just make an interpretation that I think is most musical and best for the singers, from my experience. Conducting my own music, well, the conductor happens to be standing right there because it's me. And I'm sorry, the composer is standing right there. That's me. And it's frightening because I'm listening and I'm conducting, and I can't turn off that judgment thing. It's kind of horrifying. So anyway, the answer is I don't like conducting my own music because I'm constantly critiquing it. This is a question about Itamar's trumpet. So it says that you mentioned that you designed your own trumpet. So what does that mean? How do you design your own trumpet? Maybe tell us about the company and how did that work?
Yeah, I mean, I can't. Well, this trumpet was built for me by Dave Monette from the Monette. I think it's called the Monette Trumpet Corporation. Dave Monette is a master trumpet builder. He's an incredible artist, and so he definitely designed this trumpet. I maybe know how to play the trumpet. I definitely don't know how to design the trumpet. But what I brought to the table, especially, is um, the idea of building a quarter tone trumpet, a trumpet with a fourth valve that enables me to play quarter tones, and then where I want it to be positioned so it will be, fit ergonomically to my needs and the way I play. Uh, Also, a lot of detail about how to fine tune the quarter tone, because there are many different ways to play a quarter tone. And of course, the trumpet is not um, a tempered instrument, actually. So we have to find exactly what will be the best. I won't go into too much details, but that was a lot of what we discussed about. And then it really was about Dave's really masterful. I mean, to me, it's almost wizardry, but his way of really tailoring the instrument to your needs in terms of your sound concept and your body, the way you use your body. It was an incredible, I mean, a real honor for me that he wanted to build this horn for me and to have that process with him, to go there, work on the horn. It's a process that takes a lot of time and a lot of man hours. And there's a team of, I think, about 10 or 12 people that really worked on this horn day and night. And I saw it with my own eyes. They stay after hours and into the late hours of the night, designing it, a new element and doing an improvement on this and an improvement on that. It was a fascinating experience. And I'll just throw in like maybe one thing about Dave's work. Um, um, a lot of what he does is about having no tension in the horn. And he also shows a lot of people how to let go of a lot of tension in your body. Um, and so, in the trumpet, you have to bend the metal a certain way and then tie it together. Um, and he has really brilliant ways of making sure that there's no tension in the bent brass tubes. So everything has to fit together really perfectly so it's aligned and then that it's resonant. Because once we have no tension, we have resonance. Um, and that sort of thing kind of goes back to what we talked about before. That is incredibly inspiring to me because when you actually see that in action, and he let me really, I feel the belt of the bell of the horn, the material that he uses. He showed me how gentle it is. He gave me a scrap bell. He said, "Okay, now bend it. You can bend it like butter." It's like, so don't break it. I was like, oh man, um, really teaches you how to let go, and see how much more resident and potent you can be in music or in anything else. And I know, Shannon, you're deep into martial arts, and that's something that is incredible, that you learn really on your body what tension is, and even if you try to strike someone, how you have to have the movement flow, and you can't, once you hold too tight, you're actually working against your own body. So that's something that I found very inspiring. in that
Thank you.
process.
And thanks for bringing up martial arts, getting me sidetracked. Now, for those of you who want to stick around after 2 o'clock, well, I will talk to you for 3 hours about martial arts and energy. No, we're not doing that. That's another time. All right. So we got time for a couple of short questions. This one I think is just sort of a comment. It says, sounds like the influence of Dr. Noon. I think that's a reference to David Noon, Dr. David Noon, who was my first composition teacher at Manhattan School of Music back in the 90s. And yeah, I mean, I can say that I mean, this is very specific, but less inspired necessarily. This piece is less inspired by his music and more by his way of thinking about art. I have not spoken to him, unfortunately, in a number of years, but he had a very holistic view of art and thought about being a composer in a way that was a little bit more wider than sort of the modern idea, or especially the 19th, 20th century idea of a composer being this like, mechanic, this person who is, almost like a superhuman and just deals with the finest details. So yes, I'll take that. Next one says, like, I felt like I was listening to music at the Cloisters. I used to live up in Washington Heights, so I'll take that. Cloisters is a beautiful metropolitan museum up in the northern part of Manhattan, where they actually have an old cloister, I believe, from France. It's gorgeous. Anyway, it says, and I was listening to a beautiful trumpet melody filtering through. How did you work to find just the right tempo without it being too slow? Well, that's a great question, because the problem with slow music is it's very seductive, in my opinion. And I've often heard it said it's much easier to write slow music than it is to write fast music, which I think is true to some degree, because when you write slow music, you just get emotionally like surrounded by these lush sounds and the extending sound. And as Itamar spoke about at the beginning, space, it's very attractive. And I think it's because as humans, before we come into this world, we spend 9 months in stillness, in quiet. There's a heartbeat, there's some gurgly sounds of the belly, but we spend 9 months kind of like in a meditative soundscape, and something about that, I feel like we all want to get back to just that stillness. So I don't look upon that as a negative thing. But once again, the problem is, how do you do it without doing it too slow? And the answer is you use a metronome. And I'll be honest, when we were doing the recording, I had a little metronome and I would listen to it, make sure I was at the right tempo before we started. And inevitably, between that and the 10 seconds later when we started, I was, 2 BPMs slower. Beats per minute slower, because I wanted to be in that slow space. So the answer is, slow is hard. So much for that. And this is one quick question for me. I like this one. Actually, I'll throw it to Itamar too. And then Itamar, you'll have the last question after this. It says, what films are especially inspiring to you? Because I did mention films. I love the Dardenne brothers. They make these wonderful films where the storyline kind of goes, I mean, it's not big drama, but it's just so much stillness, so much space. I don't think they ever have any music. Can't remember any films that even have music. It's just, the whole thing becomes a sonic soundscape. So I love their films. And also on the opposite side, I love Paul Thomas Anderson's films, because he is drama, drama, drama. And it's like, he's a great artist, and everything he's done, I mean, it just sort of floors me. So how about you, Itamar? Because we're talking about films now, so why not?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of so many. I'm a big fan of the Coen brothers films. Barton Fink is one of my all-time favorites. Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? The Big Lebowski. I'm also a big fan of Spike Lee's movies. Of course, Scorsese. I'm a huge fan of Apocalypse Now. And The Gypsy Hour. I'm not sure if that's actually the English translation, because I watched it, I call it like in the Hebrew translation. And I like the old Fritz Lang movies. And recently I just saw the new movie Uncut Gems. I don't know if you've seen it with Adam Sandler. And I thought I think it's an instant classic, and I think it's a modern, um, I think they're modern masters. So that was a really great movie.
Yeah. So after this, we have the Kung Fu podcast, which you can tune in for, and then we'll have the movie one. All right, we've got just 2 minutes left, and I want to respect people's time because I'm a teacher, and teachers are always staring at the clock, mostly because we want to get those kids out of the classroom so we can breathe. No, but I don't mean that. All right, so this last question, I think it's actually kind of more for Itamar because I'm not 100% sure, but it says, are there plans for this to be released on an album? I mean, the answer is I hope so, but Itamar, I know we've been talking about this. Do you want to kind of give a quick thought on that?
Um, I would say most definitely. I mean, we really hope to. I think it's a beautiful piece. I think it really deserved to be on an album. I think we'll definitely find a way to do it. So the answer is yes.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, obviously, so in this case, as you saw, so this piece is actually written for string orchestra. And so what I did, because obviously as gracious as the Queen's Council on the Arts is, I mean, obviously that's not going to pay for a recording with a string orchestra. That costs a lot more money. So we made the decision to do a small scale production of this. Itamar and I have lots of plans. He also has some music that he is working on for strings and his band, which he'll be sharing more later. But so we're hoping we can find some way, if any of you have lots of funding, but no, we have other means to make an album with basically Itamar and strings. And I'll kind of end on saying that I'm grateful that I know a lot of people joining us are friends of mine and family of mine, and but the truth of the matter here is this whole project was not really intended to be about me, although I realize I wrote a lot of the notes. But this is really like I always wanted to make. I'll go back to what I said at the beginning. I always wanted to work collaboratively with an improvising soloist, and there are very few of them. And those that I've come across are excellent musicians, but our languages don't work, and it wouldn't make any sense, So when I heard Itamar 5 years ago, I said, I want to make a piece to showcase him. And that's honestly what I've always wanted to do. So, and I hope you can see in the video, which Joe did an incredible job with it. Like, even when you're not watching Itamar, as soon as he comes back on, you're like, oh, there he is. I missed him. What's he doing now? It's like, it's just all about you. And unfortunately, because of COVID, we never got to perform this live. So the goal, of course, first is to get some live performances. We already have lots of plans for that in the near future, which we'll share. But this for me is all for Itamar. I think he's just a beautiful human and artist. And if I could put some notes together to give him another opportunity, I'm happy to do so. So we're going to finish up. So I want to thank everyone for attending this event. And I would ask you all to continue to support the arts, especially in our case, music. As you know, because of COVID, musicians are not able to play out, except for some live stream events. There's very little opportunity for musicians to really make music. And obviously, it's very, very hard for them, especially for those that rely solely on performances. So I just ask that you would continue to support the arts. And I look forward to sharing more music with you all very soon. I wish you, your family, your friends, health, joy, and peace. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. If you need to reach me, you could find me on my website, sstriker.com. You could write me there. And otherwise, have a wonderful, wonderful day or night, depending on where you are. Thank you all so much, and bye-bye.